What's up, guys? Today what we're going to be checking out is what I think I'm going to call a mix and match guitar rig. For a while now, my main setup has been this Diamond Monarch over here, my amazing US Custom Diamond Phantom amp, and my US Custom Diamond 2x12. So an entire guitar rig made by the same company. And I know for a fact that Diamond voices all of their products to kind of go together. And so it had me thinking, what if I kind of switched everything out and did just like a comparison between all of the different pieces of the gear. So what we've got 3 guitars, 3 amps, and 2 cabs, and we're going to be shooting them out in a full mix, and then I'm going to do the solo guitars. So let's get on to the gear and what we got going on. Alright, so the first guitar is going to be this limited edition, I think it's a 2011 Ibanez, what is it? S570 MQM Ibanez. Get your names together. Really cool limited edition guitar. It's an S series with a Wizard 3 maple neck, and it is loaded with Ibanez's stock Infinity pickups. The next guitar is my first electric, actually. It's an Ibanez GSA 60 that I've completely modded the crap out of. There's really nothing stock about this guitar anymore aside from the actual wood itself, and it is loaded with a Seymour Duncan JB in it. And then, of course, lastly, we have this gorgeous Diamond Monarch EX in the amazing ice blue finish. I know on these cameras, for whatever reason, it kind of shows up as more of a teal color, but it's actually an ice blue color, and it has this beautiful quilt maple top on it. And it is loaded with Seymour Duncan Custom Shop, USA Custom Shop. It's the DD1 and the DD5, and these pickups are only available in Diamond guitars. Seymour Duncan makes them custom for Diamond. The best way I can describe it is maybe somewhere between like a more refined JB with like maybe a little bit of a custom 5 flavor added into it. Really cool pickups. And then for the amps, you can see on the tower next to me on top, we've got the Jet City 100 HDM based on the legendary Soldano overdrive circuit. It's pretty much a clone of a Soldano Hot Rod 100, not the SLO, but the Hot Rod 100. Below that, we have my super modified PV6505 Plus that I have modded to make sound as close as possible to the Soldano SLO. So these two would be really cool to see compared next to each other because they're both kind of going for the same thing. I have the 6505 in the, I have a switch that goes from the 5150 to the 5152 setting, so it's in the 5152/6505 plus setting. So like a weird hybrid between the SLO and that amp. Really cool combination. And then we have the Beast, the Diamond USA Custom Phantom. And the cabs that those are going to be running into are, like I said, the US Custom Diamond 2x12 loaded with Celestia Vintage 30s. And below that, we have a custom USA made Avatar 2x12 loaded with Vintage 30s as well. And the rest of the signal chain is just going to be a Shure SM57 miking up both these guys. I recorded DIs of the guitars to reamp through them, so the performance for the guitars are the same respectively. I try to play as consistently as possible to give a really good comparison of what each of the guitars sound like, and that was reamped and recorded by me. The mic placement was a little bit different for each cab. I mic'd it up to where I thought it sounded best on each cabinet. And like I said, we're going to do a full mix comparison first, so like a full band context, and then after that it'll be the solo guitars. And I'll make sure I include timestamps down below in the description so you guys can compare more easily and kind of skip around to what you want to hear. But other than that, I'm just going to flip through all of the different things. Sorry, it's the same riff recorded over and over and over again, but it's just real simple open power chords and some chugging just to give you guys a better idea of a baseline comparison between all these things. So let's go ahead and get to the shootout. Alright, so I thought that was interesting. Just to start off, I'm gonna say that I still think my favorite is the entire diamond rig, just because I really feel like all the pieces are kind of voiced to go together. Let's go ahead and go through all of the pieces of gear first off. I thought for the guitars, the Monarch over here sounded the clearest in the high end and in the mid-range. The blue Ibanez with the JB, I thought had the best lower mids and the best low end. The red Ibanez with the stock Ibanez Infinity pickups was a little dull to me. It was a little muddy in the low end too. But overall, I think the guitars made the least amount of difference as far as what could be changed in a guitar rig. Now for the amps. Again, this amp has been my favorite since I've gotten it. The Diamond Phantom is just so thick and meaty. It just punches through the mix like crazy. It is missing the harsher upper mid-range spike that these two amps have. And I think that has a lot to do with the cab, which I'll get to in a second. But the cabs and the amps from Diamond are voiced to go together. And so since Vintage 30s have that notorious upper mid-range spike, the amp kind of lacks that. And so when you combine those two things together, it really produces a very thick and even tone across the spectrum. The Jet City and the PV, they both have that upper mid-range spike, which, depending on the situation, can get kind of annoying and kind of abrasive. For lower tunings, I find it especially helpful because that really kind of rips through the mix a little bit. But in like standard tunings and stuff, it can be a little abrasive at times. So I think that's also why the Phantom sounds a little scooped in comparison. It's actually not. It's actually the thickest and punchiest of the amps. It's just missing that upper mid-range spike, and so when you take that away, it sounds like the mid-range is a little more scooped and like something is missing, but it's not. It's just a little more even and balanced. I also thought the Phantom had the widest tone. It like extends way into the upper frequencies and gives like a lot of air and clarity. And if you really want to make the amp kind of more rude and aggressive, you can. It gives like a lot of like snarl and bite to it, which I love. The amp really jumps out of the speakers. I noticed on no matter what I was listening to, whenever the Phantom came on, it just kind of punches through the mix and just like really jumps out of the speakers. So it's just kind of letting you know that it's there and it's meant to be heard. Now, like I said, the PV and the Jet City, they sounded very similar, which is to be expected because we have a design by Soldano, which was just licensed by Jet City, but it's like the Soldano overdrive circuit. And then we have a revision of the 5150, the 6505 Plus, that the OG 5150 was kind of based off of the Soldano SLO. So we're already starting with a similar amp, and then I've just kind of tweaked it to get closer to that sound because this was before I even had the Jet City, and I was just obsessed with the Soldano sound. So I think it's interesting how close those two amps really are. It may seem a little bit redundant, but the PV is slightly more aggressive and has like this huge thick bottom end, whereas the Jet City is just like pure Soldano overdrive. I will say that the PV had almost like the smallest like frequency response. Like it was very narrow and focused. On the chugs, it's got this huge booming deep low end. But that seems to only be apparent on the chugs, and it just kind of goes away, and then it's just this like mid-range knife that just kind of cuts through the mix. The Jet City is a little bit wider, and then the Phantom is just like all the way out here. It just covers the entire frequency spectrum. I will say that I'd like a little more top-end bite and clarity out of the PV. But it seems like no matter what I do with the settings, I just can't quite get that sparkle and air not so much fizz, but just like that snarl and bite out of the top end that I get from the other two amps. Alright, so let's move on to the cabs. Like I said, the Diamond cab is voiced to go with the amps, and they designed the guitars through the amps, so again, everything kind of goes together. The Diamond cab is by far my favorite. It's a very modern and aggressive sound, really punchy mid-range. It sounds a little more scooped overall, but that's because the low end extension and the high end extension are just really wide. If you notice that's kind of the Diamond sound. It seems like they just go for like the widest, most extended tone you can get. So like lots of high end, lots of low end, and then just like really nice mid-range to fill everything out. Now, the Avatar cab actually does have a deeper low end, especially in the room. It's not as apparent mic'd up, but the Avatar in the room just has this huge blooming low end. But it's in the mix, I feel like it gets a little lost because the high end is a little rolled off for me, and the mid-range, it's a good mid-range that really cuts through the mix, but it's a little harsher, and it doesn't sound like as balanced of a cab, and if anything, it sounds a little more vintage sounding to me. So I have a really good option of, you know, choosing between modern and vintage depending on what I'm going for with my sound. But overall, I think between the cabs, I prefer the Diamond, since most of the time I'm going for a modern, aggressive metal tone. So, the differences in order, from least to greatest, the guitars made a little bit of a difference. You know, the pickups, I think they're all kind of similar pickups, so maybe if I had some different pickups to swap in there that, you know, were supposed to be different flavors, especially the Diamond and the Blue Ibanez, since those, one is a JB and the DD1 is supposed to be kind of like a JB. Those two especially sounded very similar to my ears, but the guitars made the least amount of difference. The amps, you know, we have two amps here that sound very similar as is, with the Diamond kind of being the outlier there, but those still made a noticeable difference between all of them. I think maybe if I had like another amp that was supposed to be voiced completely different, you know, we might have seen an even bigger difference between all of them. And then the cabs made a huge difference to the sound. I try to tell people this all the time, that if you want to change your tone, start with your speakers and your cab. You can see even with the same speakers in these two cabs, they sound drastically different. And different speakers are just going to be worlds apart. I'd love to swap in different speakers in here eventually, just to kind of play around with things. But you can definitely see how big of a difference your speaker cab makes in your sound. Alright, so that's pretty much all I have for you guys. This was just supposed to be a fun comparison between all of the different core aspects of my rig. I didn't really touch on pedals and stuff because that's just a whole nother mess, and I'm not really much of a pedal guy to begin with. But I've never really done a comparison between all of these different aspects of my rig, especially in the same song. I just kind of thought that, oh hey, I like this guitar, I like this amp, and I like this cab, and they all seem to go together very well. And I still think that, you know, the 100% entirely Diamond rig just sounds amazing to my ears. But I'd love to hear in the comments below what your guys' favorite combination was, and what part you thought made the biggest difference. And if there's anything else you guys would like me to check out, make sure you leave that down below as well. Alright, well that's it. I've been Luke. Make sure you guys let me know what you want to see in the future down below, and make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. See you guys next time.